When Mother's Day means celebrating your mom, your wife, maybe even your daughter as a new mom, trust 1-800-Flowers to help you celebrate every important woman in your life. With double blooms from 1-800-Flowers, order 1 dozen roses and get another dozen for free. It's a simple way to give beautifully, with colorful blooms that make Mother's Day feel meaningful. For every mom you're celebrating, order with confidence and get double blooms at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
Hey now.
Hey now. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Coming up on this episode, it is listener DMs, and I've got lots of them. I'm going to get to those coming up in just a few minutes. And I got some good feedback on the way I did listener DMs this past Monday when I still weaved in some of the clips like you normally hear on a regular episode of After 9. So I'm going to do that again today. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to cover a lot of different topics, including some throwbacks in there as well. So stick around. That's coming up in a sec. Before I get to that, though, I want to do something, and it's something that's on my mind. It's something that I don't even really know how to process it. I'm usually not at a loss for words, but in this particular case, I am. A very good friend of mine, my former radio co-host at one point, his name is Dave Blezard. And him and I have been friends for well over 25 years now. He's dealing with something in his personal life, in his family situation, and I'm hoping that there's somebody listening to the pod today who can help out my friend Dave. If you look in the description of this episode, there is a link to a GoFundMe. That GoFundMe has been set up by somebody to try and raise money for Dave and his family. And here's why. Nobody ever wants to hear the words, "You've got cancer." But there's one thing even worse than hearing that. It's hearing your kid has cancer. Dave and his beautiful wife, Crystal, have a lovely little girl. She is just the sweetest thing. Her name is Ellie, and she's about 3 years old, and Ellie was recently diagnosed with cancer. She is going through a battery of treatments and testing and things like that at McMaster Children's Hospital in Hamilton. And I mean, that's just a horrible thing for a kid to have to go through. And I can imagine awful for parents to go through as well. Ellie is, she's going to need to go to the U.S. to get some very special targeted treatment. And obviously Dave and his wife and their family, they need some money. So this GoFundMe has been set up to try and get Ellie the absolute best care possible. So here's my ask to you, and here's how I'm going to sweeten the pot a little bit. If you click that GoFundMe link, anybody, and I know that there's a lot of people who can't. Times are tough. Money is tight. I get that. Only if you're able to. If you're able to make a donation, $10, $20, $30, 50, 100, whatever. I want to get them to their fundraising goal of $16,000. And as I record, they're just below $15,000. So they're very, very close. But I want to do more for them. So here's my pitch. If you're able to make a donation, and we can get them above their $16,000 target before the end of this weekend, here is what I'm going to do, even though it will likely get me in a hell of a lot of trouble. One of the things that I low-key own is the tapes. Dave and I were on the radio together for many, many, many years. And over the years, Dave did some stuff that I don't think anybody in radio will ever be able to replicate it. He's the funniest guy I know. And I've got the tapes of the funniest bits that Dave and I ever did on the radio. So what I'm going to do is make this promise that if by Monday we can get them up to their fundraising goal of $16,000 in Monday's episode of Scott Fox After 9, I will give you the best of Dave Blezard audio in the pod. It's that's going to create some legal issues, I know. But anyway, I don't care. I want to raise money for Dave and his family. So if you're able to contribute, I would sincerely appreciate that. And I know that he would too. Like I said earlier, nobody ever wants to hear the words, your kid has cancer. I'm not even sure how you process that, but I want to help. And if you're able to help, that would go a long way for Dave and his family. And like I said, I'll make it worth your while. I'm sweetening the pot. I am going to give you the best of Dave in my podcast coming up on Monday, if you're able to, and we can get over that fundraising goal. All right, that's my pitch, everybody. Again, the link for the GoFundMe is in the description of this episode. Just take a look at it on your phone and click that. And if you're able to make a donation, that would be great. Okay, let's get into the pod. I've got a lot of DMs here, and like I said, I'm going to mix them with some of the clips that you are used to hearing here on After 9, and we're going to jump right into it now. Let's go with this one from Brian. Hey, Scott, simple question for your listener DMs and the topic of floor crossing. You played the other day Kelly DeRitter, and I hope I'm saying her name right. I believe she's a Kitchener member of Parliament. Why will nobody expose names? She says she was approached by them. Who's them? Shouldn't people know if it's considered an acceptable practice by the government? Brian, I agree with you. I think that that's a fabulous question. We have heard from no shortage of conservatives that they've been approached by the Liberals to cross the floor. And I think a lot of Canadians, based on the polling anyway, feel that that is a very dirty, shady tactic. Mark Carney trying to bribe people to cross the floor because he couldn't win a majority at the ballot box. Okay, I think most people agree, not good news. Why won't the Conservatives name names, though? Why won't they come out and say, I was approached by, I don't know, Anita Anand. I was approached by Mark Miller. I was approached by Dominic LeBlanc. I was approached by Melanie Joly. Why won't they name names? Because one of the things that's on my mind, and clearly it is on Brian's mind here as well, why aren't the RCMP involved? See, if you, as a citizen, try and bribe a public official, you may have committed a crime. Why is it not a crime if a public official tries to bribe a public official? Seems like that should be something the RCMP is looking into. And as far as I'm aware, they're not actually doing that. But Brian, good question. Thank you very much. And if there's any Conservative members of Parliament listening, and I know there's a few, maybe you should consider that. Maybe talk about why you won't name names, because I think the people would like to know. I'm going to move on. This one from Rob. Scott, buddy, of course it has to be private companies that are going to be accessing the Sovereign Wealth Fund. How else is Brookfield going to sink their teeth into it? Rob, thank you very much for that DM. There's a lot of people who feel this Sovereign Wealth Fund that Mark Carney is creating is really just a gift to the folks that are still admittedly working at Brookfield. It's going to be something that Brookfield is going to be able to get their hands on and probably turn around a lot of profit. But of course, it comes with a massive donation of 25 billion Canadian tax dollars that we don't have. We got to print that money to put it into the fund. Yesterday, Mark Carney was talking about that Sovereign Wealth Fund. Here's the Prime Minister.
And that's where the Sovereign Wealth Fund comes in, the Canada Strong Fund comes in. Because in the past, what happens through government intervention, and it's the right thing to do for the economy, provide support through loans, provide certain incentives and others to get these big projects done. It's good work. It helps grow the economy. St. Lawrence Seaway created all these export opportunities, for example, for thousands of businesses, hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs, and that's great. And that's what will happen with what we're doing. But at the core of each of these is a business, a private project that makes money, makes a profit. That's fair. That's good. They're taking risk. But what the Sovereign Fund can do is that we share in some of that we, all Canadians, are an investor in that. Through the Government of Canada as the intermediary, we will make it possible for others to come in. And that's a partnership model. It'll be absolutely clear how that's done. It'll be run as an arm's length, Crown Corporation, professional board, public reporting. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's a new way of building, and it's building with union workers. It's building the country strong.
Mark Carney is creating a hedge fund, and he wants you to take the risk. He wants you to jump in and take the risk with him. Well, he's not really taking a risk. It's taxpayer money. Yeah, I mean, back to the question that inspired that, I have a feeling that this is going to be a big windfall for big companies like Brookfield. The Sovereign Wealth Fund, and of course, it's not a sovereign wealth fund because typically a sovereign wealth fund is created by countries that have accumulated wealth, that spend less than they bring in, and they invest those profits or that excess money into their sovereign wealth fund. Canada is not in that situation. We are broke and things are not looking good. I'm going to move on to another question. This one from Megan. Question for Friday DMs. This countrywide deficit. Help me understand. Forget the math because it's not mathing. Realistically, will Canada ever pay off its debt? I see the numbers when I pay attention. There is always a plan on paying off some debt, never entirely. From my memory, we never pay off the whole amount, but we do make payments on our debt. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then COVID, emergency funding, spending suddenly, unpredictably added way more than previous years. I just don't get the purpose or point. If we're never going to pay off all the debt, then why even acknowledge it? Why fake budgets to pay some of it off when you know instead it will be added to? What's the point, really? Megan, thank you for the note here. There's a couple typos here, a little harder to read, but I certainly get what you're going for. Canada has a debt that is almost completely insurmountable. The problem here is, number one, we're about to start paying $80 billion a year in interest payments on our debt. $80 billion a year. That's a staggering number. That's 80 billion more that we're spending than we're bringing in. So, of course, when we're doing that, we can't pay off any debt. Do we just throw our hands in the air and say, we're never going to pay this off anyway, so forget it? I mean, it's a strategy. I'm not going to say it's a good or bad strategy. There's a lot of people in their personal lives that just ignore debt. What's the big deal? Just forget about it. As a country, we're expected to pay off our debt. And if the creditors, which are bondholders, ever want their money, then we absolutely do have to pay off our debt. If we go into default, that'll be catastrophic for our economy and our future credit abilities. In this particular case, we're not even trying. We're spending more than we're bringing in. There's no money to pay off the principal. We're just paying off interest. I think we've got to figure out a way to get that debt down a lot. It's well over $1 trillion that we owe, and $80 billion a year in interest is not going to help in any way. The government's playing some weird accounting tricks. We've known for a year that Mark Carney wants to change up the way the accounting is done, and frankly, I think they've taken it way too far. You know who weighed in on this was the At Issue panel on the CBC. I want to play for you just 20 seconds here of Andrew Coyne, writer for the Globe and Mail, panelist on the CBC, The National's At Issue. Listen to Andrew talk about it.
The government's not only unconcerned about this, but presents a kind of a cack-handed way of explaining it, where if you subtract the CPP and the QPP, we have a debt-to-GDP ratio of only 10%. Well, you can't actually use pension funds to pay off your debts. It's a completely bogus comparison.
That's it. That's full stop. That's the government trying to make the numbers look better than they are. But Andrew mentioned something there, and it leads into this next question. It's from Trevor. Not sure if this has been asked or answered already on listener DMs, but Scott, could you please explain what GDP and debt-to-GDP ratio mean and how that pertains to the state of the country? Sure, Trevor. GDP is the economic output of our economy. Debt-to-GDP ratio compares our total public debt to our annual output, GDP. So there's a formula for it. Let me see if I can figure this out. A nice way to explain it. You take the total public debt and you divide it by the GDP and you multiply it by 100. So if a country has a, say, 50% ratio, debt to GDP ratio, 50%, the debt is half of the country's annual economic output. That would be a high debt to GDP ratio. In case you're wondering, Canada's current debt to GDP ratio, 69.2%. 69.2%. It's a staggering amount of money, but we've built up an insane amount of debt. It's just crazy how much we owe in this country. I'll get back to the listener DMs in just a sec. I told you I would continue to weave in some audio on this episode. So now let's go to the leader of the New Democrat Party federally. The new guy's name is Avi Lewis. Let's talk a little bit about how the NDP feels about the Liberals.
I think it's really telling that the climate champions in the Liberal cabinet and the Liberal caucus have been systematically fleeing the ship. Stephen Guilbeault and Jonathan Wilkinson have been well known for climate advocacy within the government. I have my own quibbles with various positions they've taken on various issues, but they have clearly represented climate leadership in Liberal terms within the Liberal Party. They've left cabinet or been removed. They are now leaving office. And I think that says all you need to know about where climate sits in the range of priorities for this government, which is nowhere visible. And I think that if I were a Liberal climate champion, which obviously I would never be and will never be, but if I was a climate champ within the Liberal Party and within the Liberal government, I might be looking for work elsewhere too.
Very interesting comments there from Avi. And he's right. You know, for a long time under Justin Trudeau, all of those climate warriors were on a rampage with their climate taxes and all sorts of stuff. Well, Mark Carney came in and the first thing he did was cancel the consumer carbon tax because he knew it was unpopular and because he wanted to try and win a majority government. You know, this government that we have now, they say they're environmentalists and they do want investment in environmental initiatives, but they only want ones that have a massive return on investment. And I'm talking about carbon capture and things like that. Technologies that are debatable whether or not it's actually going to make a difference. You know, in the past, the Liberals stood for something. Now all those people just shut up because Mark Carney told them to shut up. Mark Carney's doing just fine. He's very into environmental ideology. Maybe he tells a good speech behind closed doors to these members of parliament. I don't know. But they're certainly not out there beating the drum like they used to. I kind of like, by the way, this new NDP leader. He is no Jagmeet Singh. He is going to go toe-to-toe with the Liberals, and he wants to put up a convincing case for progressives, Canadian progressives, to come back to the NDP. Progressives always had a home in the NDP. The problem was when Justin Trudeau was the prime minister, he was so far to the left that the progressives felt good with the Liberals. Now Mark Carney, many on the left feel he's a little too far right for their liking. And Avi Lewis is trying to carve out a place for progressives to park their vote. And he wants them to do it with the NDP. Basically, what the left has to do is decide what they actually stand for. If you truly believe that carbon is a clear and present danger to our world, you're not really getting what you voted for in the Liberal Party. But you probably would with the Greens or with the NDP. If you are a member of the NDP, your values were compromised quite a bit. The NDP was in bed with the Liberals, propping them up for years. I know that was deeply embarrassing for you guys for a long, long time. I like that Avi is trying to rebuild the left. I like that he's trying to create a home for progressives to have a political party in Canada. And frankly, I think their voice is important in our overall debate. So I've got no problem with what Avi is doing over there. I think it's good stuff. And if you're a progressive, ask yourself what you stand for. Do you truly believe in fighting carbon? Do you truly believe in green initiatives? Do you truly believe in some of that woke ideology that Trudeau pushed? Because a lot of that has been buried by Mark Carney. He says he cares about it, but the actions don't match the words. Well, now you've got a progressive party on the left, and you've just got to decide if you have values. If you actually believe what you say you believe. If you do, you're probably far more aligned with the NDP than you are with the Liberals. Let's go on to the next DM. This one is from Mark. Scott, just listen to your podcast from Thursday. That son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem, talking about gas prices being elevated as well as food prices being elevated. Don't both of those go hand in hand? Aren't the food prices elevated due to the fact that gas prices are elevated? If they just remove some of the taxes that this government takes from us at the gas pump, everything would go down. And maybe they could actually reduce interest rates. Mark, thank you. I agree with many that want the interest rates to go down. I don't think they need to be this high, and frankly, they shouldn't be this high when so many people in the middle class are struggling. When it comes to gas prices, that's an interesting one. The Conservatives have been calling on Mark Carney to get rid of the taxes for the rest of the year on gas. That would save us 25 cents a liter. Well, they decided, nope, we're only going to do it till Labor Day, and we're only going to take the excise tax off. Well, that is contributing to inflation. And while I don't think the Bank of Canada can bring down gas price inflation by raising interest rates, that's a completely stupid idea. They will be concerned about food prices. And yes, food prices are elevated when gas prices are elevated because most of the food is shipped by trucks. This is a very simple thing. Conservatives have been trying to make this point since we had the carbon tax. When you make it more expensive to drive, it increases the price of food. Liberals insisted that was craziness, and that is not true. Well, now even they are starting to acknowledge, yeah, actually, that is kind of true. And they're scrambling. I think the prime minister should do the right thing. It was good that he took the excise tax off. Now get rid of the rest of them. That new clean fuel standard, apparently that's adding at least 7 cents a liter to every liter that we pay. Plus, they charge tax on the total, which includes other taxes. It's a tax on a tax on a tax. We got to do something about gas prices. But thank you very much for that DM. This one is from Anthony. Hey, Scott, I've got 2 questions. Do you think the general consensus in this country would change if the media magically switched to conservative ideologies? Okay, first question, I don't think they ever would. The problem here is most of these media people are liberals, and they're also very, very into getting their government subsidies. They make a lot of money that they get handed from the government. And while people do talk a lot about the subsidies that the media gets, keep in mind, those aren't the only subsidies. The government is pumping tens of millions of dollars into the media. And a lot of people feel the media, if they had integrity, would not accept that money. How can you accept money from them and then give them objective coverage? You can't. It's impossible. You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. And that's part of the problem we have. But the government also has a lot of power in their advertising buying. You cannot watch TV or listen to the radio in this country for more than 10 minutes without hearing either a provincial government or federal government commercial that they paid for with your tax dollars, raving about what a great job they're doing. We got to protect Canada. Keep Canada strong. You've seen those commercials. Yeah, if they decided to cut that ad buy, that would have a direct impact on the broadcasters that are airing those commercials. The government has got the media bought and paid for. Would things change if we had a conservative media? No. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want a conservative media. I want an objective media that simply reports the facts and lets people make up their own mind. That's the ideal that we should be going for, but we will never have that as long as the media is beholden to the Liberal Party. Second question, do bills in Canada work like they do here in the U.S., where the proposing party can hide things in them that differ from the name? Keep up the amazing work. I am a listener every single day. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening. Anthony, do the Canadian government hide stuff in bills? Yeah, 1,000% they do. Those are called omnibus bills. And if you have a budget bill, for example, the budget bill should be nothing more than the budget. But sometimes parties will bury other things in there, hoping that they don't get noticed or hoping they don't get the same amount of scrutiny because they're buried in with something else. I'll give you an example. Buried in the spring economic update the other day was something about selling off and privatizing Canada's airports. Well, that has nothing to do with the budget. Nothing at all. Doug Ford in Ontario just passed his budget the other day. Was it last week they passed the budget? Buried in the budget bill was his changes to the freedom of information laws. That has nothing to do with the budget. Politicians do that sort of thing all the time. It's dishonest. It's undemocratic. It doesn't allow for proper scrutiny and debate. It is wrong. But governments do it all the time. I don't think it's right. I don't think most Canadians are even really paying attention when that happens. And let's be honest, that's part of the strategy. That's why political parties do it. But I'm not a fan of omnibus bills. Me personally, I don't like them. But a bill is a bill, and every part of the bill is supposed to be debated and voted on. So maybe I'm off on this one. I just don't. I feel like it's shady. How about that? It feels a little shady and a little dishonest to take something that has nothing to do with the bill you're proposing and bury it in there. But politicians are going to keep doing it because it's good for them politically. By the way, on the topic of privatizing our airports, let's go once again to the leader of the federal NDP, Avi Lewis. He was talking about it yesterday.
I guess I'll shock everyone by saying that privatization doesn't benefit the public purse. Except in the short term. In the long term, it can be a risk to safety, especially in essential infrastructure like airports. Workers always pay the price in privatization schemes, and the public always ends up paying more in the end. Whether it's privatization of garbage or privatization of parking meters, history is littered with examples of the failures of privatization, and this is a potentially a very costly and dangerous plan for short-term revenues that remove accountability for some of the most important pieces of critical infrastructure in Canada. We're absolutely opposed.
Just on a follow-up to that, when you're talking about those revenues, the government is signaling their intention to use those revenues as a part of their way to finance their sovereign wealth fund. So do you think that's how they should be going about it?
The proposal is getting worse and worse as you describe the details. A sovereign wealth fund should be, the models of sovereign wealth funds that the Prime Minister has been referencing, like Norway, are the complete opposite of the sovereign wealth fund that he's actually proposing for Canada. He's talking about selling public assets to put public money into a fund that is going to subsidize profitable private projects that are done in the so-called national interest, as opposed to taking a fair level of taxation, as Norway has, from finite resources and creating a fund over time that supports our social safety net and that supports a transition away from fossil fuels. There's just like the invocation of Norway is an indictment of the Prime Minister's way of doing this plan, and I don't know why he chooses to reference it, because the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is exactly how it ought to be done, and the Sovereign Wealth Fund proposed this week in Ottawa will be yet another subsidy for already profitable corporations.
Hear, hear. Well said, Avi Lewis. Now, let's go to another listener DM. This one is from Lindsay. Hey, Scott, love the pod today as usual. Loved hearing the stats for trade workers out there. My husband is one of those people without a job. He's been without since April 2025. If we aren't building, there's no work. It's stupid that they're trying to shove everyone into the trades when there is no work. He's been constantly looking for over a year. A couple of interviews, but that's it. We have a friend who's been in HVAC for over 30 years and says he has never in his whole career seen the industry this slow. It's crazy. Okay, Lindsay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. When it comes to forcing people into the trades, I maintain that that's what this government is doing. They are forcing people into the trades and they are preying on students. They got unemployment for young people as high as they possibly could. It is next to impossible for young people to get typical young people jobs. Then they cut out some of the university funding, the OSAP and stuff like that. In Ontario, it's OSAP. It may be different things in other provinces. That's the Ontario Student Assistance Plan. And just a couple of weeks ago, Premier Doug Ford came out and said, we're going to cut these grants and he's going to allow universities to raise tuition. Here's why they're doing it. Everyone needs to understand that our government is deciding who is going to win and who is going to lose, just like with the Sovereign Wealth Fund. If you come from money and you can afford those higher tuition rates and less grants and afford to take on a big loan, you can go to university. No problem. But they've made it so expensive that it's so unattainable for so many families that their only option is to send their kid into a trade. And the money that they're putting up to try and get people into the trades, it's tangible money. They're basically saying, here's the easy route, but it's really just for people that don't have a lot of money. I think that's wrong. I think it should be up to students and families to decide their own future. And I think they should be smart about it. I think they should look at where the puck is going, and they should be going after careers where there is a lot of potential. And there is potential in the trades. While things may be slow now, there's reason to think there could be some light on the horizon if we're actually going to build like the Prime Minister says we're going to build. The problem is, I just don't believe that we're going to build like that. If we've already got between 1 and 200,000 unemployed trades workers, why the big push to put more people into the trades? They're anticipating that there's going to be more work for tradespeople. They also want a nation of poor working class. There's no other way to look at it. Why else would they be doing that and preying upon students who have no other options financially? If your kid is feeling like they have to go into the trades, I feel sick about that. Nobody should be forced into a career path they don't want to go into. But having said that, there is reason to think there could be more job stability and more money in the trades. It's not for everybody, you know? I really, really hate how dishonest Doug Ford and Mark Carney have been about their true intentions. They are trying like crazy to get kids into the trades, and kids weren't taking them up on it. So they made them go into the trades by gutting OSAP and now by pumping all this money into the trades and bombarding kids in high school with nonstop trade school fairs. I don't like the way they did it. I think it's unfair to the kids, and I think that the kids today should have the exact same opportunity as the kids last year had, and the ones before them, and the ones before them. So awful what we've done to young people in this country. They have no job prospects, and then we're forcing them into a career that some of them simply do not want to go into. I'm going to play one more clip for you from the federal NDP leader, and then I'm going to get to the topic of immigration. Avi Lewis here talking about MAID. As you've likely heard, there is a push to try and offer MAID to people whose only condition is a mental health condition. Well, let's hear what the NDP has to say about that.
I think the question of MAID in Canada has been, the subject has been refashioned recently as we see people choosing MAID out of desperation. And I think that for people with disabilities, I know the disability community is deeply disturbed. A community that lives in legislated poverty with an insulting $200 a month disability benefit, and despite the much vaunted changes to the application process for the disability tax credit this week in Ottawa, it's still way too hard. The disability tax credit is still connected to the disability benefit, and people are living in legislated poverty. People in mental health crisis should be getting the supports that they need. Mental health is part of your health. It has to be part of our universal, publicly funded health system. If people are choosing to die because they can't get supports that they need in life, something is broken in our system.
Very interesting to hear the NDP now use the words, something is broken in our country. By the way, on the topic of MAID, this came up at a committee hearing just the other day. CAMH is Canada's largest mental health research facility. They don't want MAID to be expanded to include people whose only condition is a mental health condition. Listen to this.
We have heard testimony overwhelmingly from psychiatrists in particular that have alluded to the very things you've alluded to here, that there is no reliable way to distinguish between suicidality as a symptom of mental illness and a good faith request for MAID. We've heard the impossibility of coming up with a standardized framework that would assess irremediability for mental illness. Would you say from your experience that we have as close to a consensus as possible from mental health care practitioners of these points?
I would say so. And again, we've done our own assessments within our institution. And this is what has come forward as a majority in terms of some of the concerns. And I would say, again, it's due to the lack of evidence that we have to really delineate between suicide intent and the request for MAID. And as you articulated, our ability to prognosticate irremediability is significantly limited, given changing diagnoses, diversity and access to treatment based on geographic region or sociodemographic factors, but also in terms of predicting response.
That was Conservative Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton questioning the witness at a committee hearing. CAMH wants to scrap indefinitely MAID for people whose only condition is a mental health condition. And what is the argument from the other side? We need to offer MAID to people who have a mental health condition. We can't have suicidal people committing suicide, so we need to kill them ourselves. Think about that. That's the argument. We need to be far more compassionate to people who have mental health issues, and we need far more supports for people with mental health issues in this country. It is disgraceful that in a country that charges as much as we do for taxes, on the promise that we've got this amazing healthcare system that you can access, that we don't consider mental health part of someone's overall health and treat it appropriately. We've got to start doing more for the people who need it. This next DM is from Clinton. Hi, Scott. Listening to Thursday's pod left me confused. We keep hearing construction is down because we lack tradespeople, yet Pierre Poilievre says 200,000 tradespeople are unemployed. I work in construction as a mill worker, and yes, work is down. So why the rush to train more trades when thousands are already out of work? Shouldn't we get them working first? Yes, absolutely. And by the way, Clinton, a small correction. Construction is not down because we lack tradespeople. Construction is down for a lot of reasons that involve everything from red tape to lack of permits to stalling by the federal government, right up to interest rates, which are making it very, very hard and difficult for builders to actually work on their projects because they got to finance those projects until they sell them. So that is a big, big problem. Should we be putting more trade workers in the pipeline when we have 200,000 unemployed? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. And I'll tell you why. Because if we are actually going to build at the scale that Mark Carney insists we're going to build at, and even though nothing has happened for a year, he swears it's coming, then yes, presumably we will need more trades workers. We also need to start thinking about the next generation. There's a lot of tradespeople that are getting up there in years, and I don't know how much longer they can do it. It takes a real toll physically on your body. So it makes sense that we start training the next generation of tradespeople, for sure. But right now, when we've got 200,000 people out of a job, it does seem a little counterintuitive to try and force more people into the system. Clinton follows up. Scott, municipal nominations open tomorrow. I'm running for the Waterloo Region District School Board trustee because our board needs a full reset after years of issues. Remind your listeners, this fall, we fire them all. Clinton, thank you very much and good luck. I am happy to see that you are taking a stand and you're actually going to try and do something about the issues that are affecting us. There's nothing wrong with being a school board trustee. Now, you're likely going to have less power and certainly less money than you would have even a few weeks ago because in Ontario, where that school board is, they've announced big changes to the way trustees operate. However, it's still a noble job. Municipal nominations are open as of today. If you are unhappy with the way your mayor or your city councilors have performed, if they have come to you continuously over the last 4 years, gaslighting you and telling you we've got to raise your taxes, they're bad at math and they don't want to make the cuts that need to be made, or they just overspend like drunken sailors. Put your name up. You might actually win. You never know. If you go to the people with a common sense argument for why you should be elected, you may well get elected. Nominations are open now. In October, we're going to have municipal elections. I firmly believe that just about everybody who's sitting on council right now or in a mayor's chair needs to go. Next fall, we fire them all because they have done nothing but raise your taxes, offer you subpar service, and anytime you try and question them on it, if you even bothered, anytime they shoot you down with ridiculous arguments. I think it's time for all of them to go. And by the way, just so you know, when you think of federal politics in terms of political parties, you know, there's the Liberals, there's the Conservatives, there's the NDP, there's the Bloc, there's the Greens. Just so you know, municipal politics are not party politics, but they very much are. And the people who are running the biggest cities in Canada would almost certainly land on the far left. They would be New Democrats in a lot of cases, not the least of which, Toronto, Olivia Chow, married to Jack Layton for a time. She's a card-carrying NDP member. Hamilton, Ontario, Andrea Horwath, former leader of the federal NDP. Most of these municipal politicians are on the far left. So if you're wondering why your taxes keep going up and you're not really seeing anything new or anything better, well, you got your answer. That's why. Don't be afraid to put your name forward. Put your name on the ballot, campaign, and you maybe could be the next mayor or city councilor or regional councilor or school board trustee in your area, and you can have a direct impact and affect some change. I'm going to get to another DM. This is a fun one from Chris. Hey, buddy, I thought I would ask you something fun. Whatever happened to Chris Sheppard? Ooh, Chris, that's a real good message. What happened to Shep? For those who don't remember, maybe you're one of my younger listeners. Back in the day, I want to say the 90s, late 80s and early 2000s, we had a radio personality in the GTA named Chris Sheppard, and he put out a whole bunch of CDs. He was part of a group called BKS and more. Shep was legendary in the nightclubs. You know what? I think I've got one. Just so you know who I'm talking about, I'm going to play this for you. This is a little bit of what Chris Sheppard sounds like.
All right, you dial 911 if you're looking for the 411 on the off-the-limit set and never duplicated one. And you find me right here on your nationally syndicated dance music radio show. It's Chris Sheppard with the Pirate out of Sweden, a man called Herbie. Follow!
Oh, that sounds good. I have had a few nights partying with Chris Sheppard over the years. I'll tell you. I can't even tell you. It was, let's just leave it at, we had a few real good nights out. Shep and myself and a few others back in the day. You're wondering what happened to him. You know, I've heard a lot of conflicting stories, and the simple answer is, from asking around over the last few days since this DM came in, nobody knows. The speculation, this is just speculation, that he is living in Costa Rica off the grid. Why would he be doing that? I have no idea. No idea whatsoever. But the story that I'm told is he's living off the grid in Costa Rica for reasons that I do not quite understand. But I hope he's doing great. Shep did some amazing parties over the years, like absolutely legendary stuff at the Warehouse and the Lyric and RPM, and the list goes on and on and on. He even, when I was in high school, I grew up listening to Chris Sheppard on the radio, on a radio station called Energy 108. And when I began my radio career and I was doing live to air broadcasts myself from other clubs, one of the most surreal moments I can remember is, and I was like 19 at the time, doing a nightclub gig, doing the things that I had heard Chris Sheppard do on the radio for years. And he came into the club and he came on the mic with me. And that was a real special moment for me when I was young in my broadcast career. Shep, I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but if this one happens to come across you, I hope you're doing great, and I'm thinking about you. Next DM, this one is from Trevor. Scott, I know you've mentioned it before in the pod, but I can't remember. What is in your famous martini? If I remember correctly, you'll tell us, but there's a secret ingredient that you add. Trevor. You're asking the magician to tell you how the trick is done. I have a version of a dry vodka martini that I make. And this came from years and years of practicing. And I do my martini a specific way because when I make that vodka martini dry, you would not be able to tell the difference between that and water. It's that easy to drink. Now, I've had a number of them over the years in trying to perfect that recipe. But one thing I've never done, you're actually mistaken here. I've never given out the recipe. So I'll tell you what goes into it. Vodka. You need two kinds. You need Kettle One vodka. That is one of them. And you need Absolute vodka. And there's a reason that those two vodkas go together, but I'm not going to explain it in here. You need Kettle One and you need Absolute. You need a little bit of vermouth. You're going to pour it in the glass. You're going to swirl it around and then throw it out. You only want a whiff of vermouth there. You're going to let your vodka chill on ice for a very long time. You want it ice cold. You shake the living hell out of that. And when you pour it over top of 2 olives. Only 2. Not 1, not 3. It's got to be 2. 2 green olives. You can try it if you want. I don't know if it'll be as great as mine, but one of these days when I throw an event, and I will one of these days, maybe I'll serve the Scott Fox Martini. Maybe I will. The people who have had it will tell you, number 1, it is delicious, and number 2, it is deadly. Because by the time you realize, I'm a little drunk, you're passed out. But thank you for bringing that up. I posted a picture on my Instagram the other day of my martini because I was out for dinner with my beautiful girlfriend, Diana, and I ordered one. And sometimes the waiters look at me kind of crazy when I tell them how I'd like the martini to be made, but they all agree it's a good drink. Let's go to yesterday, House of Commons. Pierre Poilievre.
Not by doing business in the marketplace, by using political power to get favors for his company. We remember that he pushed for heat pump subsidies. Well, Brookfield sells heat pumps. Remember he pushed for money printing inflation. Well, the CEO of Brookfield confirmed on May 20th of last year that Brookfield profits off of inflation. Many of our things are regulated, rate-based or contractual in nature, and inflation is actually a positive to the numbers. So as inflation comes in, it actually helps the revenue streams of those businesses, end quote, said the CEO of Brookfield. And then, of course, this is a prime minister who said a little over a year ago that he had successfully lobbied for a more expensive form of so-called sustainable aviation fuel right before Brookfield, his company, invested $1 billion in that same fuel. So forcing Canadian passengers to pay higher airline fees for this more pricey fuel, which then his company profited from. This is not business, this is political manipulation. It raises the cost for everyone, especially those who don't have political power. That is the difference between the real economy and the protected economy. In the real economy, inflation crushes families. It raises grocery bills. It raises rent, mortgage payments. It costs you more for gas, heat, and electricity. It shuts young people out of home ownership and starting families. But in a political economy, inflation can be used as a revenue tool for elites and schemers. Government creates the rule creates the market, the insider sees the rule coming, the insider invests, the consumer pays, the politically connected profit.
I think you should go back and listen to that again. Rewind. It was 1 minute and 45 seconds. You should go back and listen to that again. And let me tell you why. Because that's what the elbows up folks don't want to acknowledge. They knew it was a good possibility when Mark Carney asked for our vote to be our prime minister last year. They knew it was a possibility, but they chose to ignore it. Mark Carney is heavily conflicted. Mark Carney is still intimately tied to Brookfield, and all of the things that are going on right now are benefiting Brookfield in many, many, many different ways. That's what Pierre Poilievre was talking about there. Go back and listen to it again. That's why the system is rigged against middle-class people right now. That's why it's rigged. Speaking of the Conservatives, as you likely know, their policy, and mine as well, let's try and repair this relationship with America. There is a delegation of Conservative MPs in Washington this weekend. The Prime Minister was asked about that yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
My question is that do you think that the Conservative diplomatic missions to Washington, D.C. help or hurt your government's efforts as you are negotiating with Americans?
Well, look, it's we're both free countries, so people can go where they wish. Any information that's it has not been our experience that people have gone to Washington and have learned anything new, nor has it been that they have learned everything that is either being discussed on the table or where the negotiations are. In the end, there's one negotiator for Canada, and that is the government of Canada. Our interlocutors in the United States are generous people. They're generous with their time, and it's good of them to meet a host of Canadians coming down. But in the end, they know and we know that we're the negotiators. So thank you.
How's that going, by the way? How is the negotiating going with the Liberals? Because so far we don't have a deal. It's been a year. We don't have a deal. We're not even talking formally. The Conservatives are trying to get a deal done. They're trying to make those relationships, trying to convince lawmakers and people who have President Trump's ear that this is silly. We've got to resolve this. They've got to look the other way on a few things. We've got to look the other way on a few things. We've got to come to an agreement and figure this out. At least the Conservatives are going. And Mark Carney kind of blew that off. Hey, a few minutes ago, I said I would... Stop it. A few minutes ago, I said I would talk about immigration, and I didn't get to that part yet, but I want to. There is a major scandal brewing in Canada right now. The FIFA Congress happens in advance of the World Cup. It's where all of the countries represented send a representative. They have this big meeting. They talk about how the cup's going to go and do whatever it is that they do. Well, the representative from Iran is also a member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which has been designated a terror group. We're not supposed to allow terrorists to come to this country under any circumstances. Guess what the federal government did? They let a terrorist come to this country. Speaking outside the House of Commons yesterday, MPs Melissa Lantsman and Michelle Rempel-Garner.
gave comment in response to serious questions about how an official of the Iranian regime was granted something called a temporary resident permit to come into Canada. This is somebody who should not be admissible to Canada because of his known and widely publicized links to a designated or listed terrorist organization in Canada. So in response to questions about this, he said, well, I can't comment on specific cases. That's ridiculous. Come on. Somehow, somebody in the government made a decision to override inadmissibility rules and issue this special tool to this person, which allowed him to get on a plane, land in Canada, and the only reason why we found out that he was in the country was because an independent journalist organization reported on it as such. So I'm sorry, the privacy rights or can't comment does not override answering questions on how this happened and how the government is going to fix it. Just a completely ridiculous answer that abdicates responsibility for the situation. And this has serious impacts for a lot of people in the country, and my colleague, the Deputy Leader, is going to speak about that.
Canadians deserve answers on how this happened, how a TRP was issued, by whom, when, if it was issued inadvertently or if it was done on purpose, and the admissibility or the dismissiveness of having somebody come here was inadvertent. All of these questions are still permeating for Canadians. They want to know why somebody in a Canadian listed terror organization has more privacy rights than a Canadian.
That's a great question. The Prime Minister wouldn't comment on this because he said, well, for privacy reasons. Let's be perfectly clear. Terrorists have no privacy expectation when they come to Canada. They're not even supposed to be here. In this case, we approved him to come to Canada. Landed. Now, we did. Once word started to spread that he was coming, then Canadian officials started perking up and saying, oh, yikes, this is going to be a political firestorm. All right, just send him back. Who approved the permit in the first place? How did this guy even get on a plane to come here?
Minister Diab, was the individual in question related to this case issued a temporary resident visa or a temporary resident permit?
Okay, let me be clear.
It's a simple question.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Temporary resident visa or temporary resident permit?
Again, as I said, I cannot comment on the individual person in question, but no IRGC member has been admitted to Canada.
Was it a temporary resident visa or a temporary resident permit?
I believe I've already responded to that.
For what reason? Why can you not answer the question, Minister?
Again, as we said, we cannot comment on a specific case in question. What is important is that
Canadians who are listening,
the individual did not come into Canada.
For the benefit of Canadians listening, a temporary resident visa is required for any Iranian citizen to enter Canada. Many do on a daily basis. A temporary resident permit is required for anyone who is found inadmissible to come to Canada for criminal reasons or other reasons. This, according to the Raoul Wallenberg Center, this individual was an IRGC intelligence commander from 1979 onwards. I find it interesting. Liberal member said an alleged IRGC member. It's been well reported they were an intelligence commander in the IRGC. They would have had to have been issued a temporary resident permit. That is a special permit that is from your department. So, Minister, did your department know that this person was inadmissible to Canada before you issued them a permit?
Again, I'm not going to be commenting on an individual case for privacy reasons.
Again, terrorists don't have any privacy expectations in Canada. That is our immigration minister, Lena Diab. You know, she's been embroiled in a lot of scandals over the last year. I can't see how she is going to remain in cabinet after this one. I mean, Mark Carney has got to eventually, at some point, do the right thing and get rid of this minister. There have been so many calls to get rid of her and take her out of that role as immigration minister. And so far, Carney hasn't wanted to do it, but I don't know how he can avoid it at this point. Last listener DM for this episode from James. Hey, Scott, just wanted to touch base on media being banned on social media networks. I'm currently working in the States, but I'm from North Bay. Previously, I would have agreed. It's terrible that the mainstream media got pushed off social media in Canada. Now that I'm in the States and seeing the difference in my Facebook media feed, I think it should stay off platforms like Facebook. There's way too many controversial headlines, misleading posts, and quite frankly, too many people believing in a narrative and not fact-checking. It's worse when people just copy and paste misinformation memes, and people such as the older generation take it all in. Yeah, I understand that trying to decipher what is accurate and inaccurate information is it's a problem, especially for the older generation. They're also the ones that fall for some of those scams that are obviously scams to most of us, but the older generation just doesn't see it. They didn't grow up in a time when you had to watch out for stuff like that. So the mis and disinformation that's out there, I think that's always going to be a problem, but I think that's a solvable one. We just have to get some smart people working on it and put in place some common sense rules. But first and foremost, we've got to stop this attack on the digital platforms, trying to hose them down for money to subsidize legacy media in Canada. That's the reason that news is banned on meta platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Can't share news because the mainstream media, the legacy media, they claim that if they share a story on Facebook and it's their story, that platform is stealing content and they're monetizing the media company's content. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a completely preposterous argument. And if anyone wants me to come and make some points at a committee hearing, I will be happy to come to Ottawa and explain to you how ridiculous that is. Stop going after these social media giants. Mainstream media is jealous because they can't compete. That's all there is to it. We could have built a Canadian social network. We could have built a Canadian digital network. There wasn't the will or the expertise to do it. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. They're all very, very successful. And you know what? They're still just as successful without Canadian news on there. We got to get off our high horse, stop trying to shake them down for money, try and form somewhat of a partnership. That would make more sense. But trying to hose them down for tax money to try and subsidize legacy media in this country is ridiculous. Legacy media has got a lot of challenges, and most of them could be solved if they looked in the mirror. Second part to this note here from James. In regards to banning social media for kids under 16, I'm a strong believer in freedom of speech, but I would be all for banning social media altogether for everyone. I think it's way too easy for people to shitpost and just spew nonsense online. And I believe adults are actually worse than kids online. I think it would be a huge uplift for mental health for this country if we went back to the old days with no social media. Fine point there, James. I'm not even going to comment on whether or not I agree or disagree, but I will tell you, things seemed a lot more calm when we weren't hiding behind a keyboard, assuming we have some anonymity to start calling people names and make wild accusations. I mean, that's a definite downfall of social media, but that's also part of the human condition. Friends, I went long today, but I was short yesterday, so I think it'll all even out. Again, if you get a chance and if you're able to, please help out my friend Dave Blezard. The link to his GoFundMe is in the description of this episode. If you're able to donate and help out his family as they deal with cancer for their 3-year-old daughter, Ellie, that would be amazing. And my promise to you, if we get above $16,000, their target, by the end of this weekend, I will give you the best of Dave Blezard. I didn't even ask him in advance. I have the tapes. I didn't even ask him, but I will do it in Monday's episode of Scott Fox After 9. Have yourselves an amazing weekend. I appreciate the hell out of you for listening, and I will catch you right back here on Monday. Go Rock Go! NLL playoffs. Tonight, I will be at TD Coliseum in Hamilton. I'm going to leave you with the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now!